Chapter 1: The silent Leviathan. The hangar doors sealed behind Jax's squadron, the hiss of pressure equalization echoing like a sigh of relief across the battered colony deck. Helmets came off, faces pale and hollow-eyed, but no one spoke of exhaustion. They had survived, and survival meant the next mission would arrive sooner than anyone wanted. Jax stripped his gloves, flexing stiff fingers. Debrief in 10, no exceptions. His voice carried the clipped authority of someone who had buried too many pilots to tolerate slack discipline. Lieutenant leaned against her fighter's fuselage, eyes scanning the tactical feed projected across the hangar wall. Krell comms went dark after the broadcast. No chatter, no fleet signatures, it's too clean. Which means they're staging, Jax replied. He didn't need to look at the data. Instinct told him the Krell never retreated without leaving a knife behind. The colony commander, a grizzled veteran named Harlan, strode across the deck. His uniform bore scorch marks from the defense grid's overload. ASF, you bought us breathing room. But intel just flagged something drifting beyond the asteroid belt. Massive object, no drive emissions. It wasn't there last week. Jax's jaw tightened. Alien, not Krell, older. The scans show architecture we can't classify. Hull size exceeds any known dreadnought. It's derelict or pretending to be. Silence fell. Even hardened pilots felt the weight of those words. Humanity had cataloged dozens of extinct civilizations, but every ruin carried whispers of things better left buried. Broke the silence. Command wants us to investigate, Harlan nodded. ASF is the only unit with combat readiness. The colony can't spare more ships. You'll take a recon wing, confirm what we're dealing with. If it's salvage, we claim it. If it's hostile, you neutralize or mark coordinates for orbital strike. Jax studied the tactical overlay. The object's silhouette resembled a leviathan frozen in stone, its hull fractured yet intact, drifting with unnatural stability. We launch at 300, full combat loadout, no assumptions. Hours later, the squadron cut through the void, engines whispering against the silence of deep space. The derelict loomed ahead, dwarfing their fighters. Its surface was etched with glyphs that shimmered faintly, as though the vacuum itself refused to let them fade. Visual confirms non-Krell origin, reported. Her voice was steady, but the tension in her tone betrayed unease. Hull composition unknown. Radiation levels spiking intermittently. Jax adjusted his sensors. It's not dead. Something inside is bleeding power. The squadron circled, beams of light tracing across jagged spires that jutted from the hull like broken teeth. A breach yawned near the midsection, wide enough to swallow a cruiser. Entry point, Jax said. Your lead, keep formation tight, weapons hot. They slipped into the breach, fighters gliding through corridors vast enough to house cities. The walls pulsed faintly, veins of energy crawling beneath alien alloy. Lieutenant Vega muttered, this place feels wrong. Like it's watching, cut the chatter, Jax snapped. Eyes forward, the deeper they flew, the more the architecture shifted, angles folding into impossible geometries, corridors twisting in ways sensors failed to map. The mothership was not built for navigation by human minds. Then the comms crackled. A low-frequency hum seeped through every channel, not a signal but a presence. It resonated in bone, in thought, in memory. Ree's hands tightened on her controls. That's not interference, it's speaking. The hum sharpened into fragments of language, alien syllables grinding against human comprehension. Jax forced his voice steady. Record everything, do not respond. The squadron's lights swept across a chamber vast as an ocean trench. At its center floated a structure resembling a cocoon, sealed by layers of black alloy. The glyphs across its surface burned brighter as their beams touched it. Vega whispered, whatever's inside, it's waking. Jax's instincts screamed retreat, but command protocols bound him. Humanity needed knowledge, even if knowledge carried teeth. Maintain position, scan the cocoon. Sensors flared, data streams flooding their consoles. The readings defied physics, mass fluctuating, energy signatures older than recorded time. Then the cocoon shuddered. A ripple surged through the chamber, slamming against their fighters like a tidal wave. Systems flickered, alarms blaring. Hum became a roar, a chorus of voices layered into one. Ree's voice cut through the chaos. Jax, it's not derelict, it's containment. The realization hit like a blade. This ship was not a vessel, it was a prison, and something inside had been sealed for eons. Jax steadied his fighter, forcing calm into his tone. ASF, fall back now. Engines flared, but the chamber twisted, corridors folding into labyrinths that trapped them. The mothership was reshaping itself, refusing to let them leave. Vega shouted, we're locked in. The cocoon split. Light poured out, not illumination but hunger, a radiance that devoured shadows and sanity alike. Shapes writhed within, vast and incomprehensible, glimpses of limbs that bent across dimensions. Jax's voice was iron. Weapons free, target the breach. Missiles streaked, detonations ripping across the chamber. The cocoon's surface cracked, fragments peeling away. The roar deepened, vibrating through their hulls. Ree's sensors screamed warnings. It's feeding on the blasts. Energy transfer. Our weapons are accelerating the breach. Jax cursed. Cease fire. All units. Defensive posture. The cocoon split wider, revealing an abyss that stared back. The presence surged into their minds, dredging memories, twisting fears into visions. Vega screamed, his fighter spiraling before stabilizers caught. Jax forced his voice steady, anchoring his squadron against panic. Listen to me. This thing wants chaos. Hold formation. We are ASF. We do not break. The chamber trembled, the mothership alive with awakening fury. Humanity had stumbled into a war older than empires, and the prison walls were failing. Jax locked eyes on the abyss, his voice ablaze against the storm. Command wanted answers. We found them. Now we fight to keep the galaxy breathing. The cocoon tore open, and the horror within began to emerge. The cocoon's tear didn't just split air, it split the local physics of the chamber. Jax's fighter bucked as a shockwave of exotic pressure slammed into its forward shielding, alarms shrilling so loud they drowned out the hum of his thrusters for 3 full seconds. When his vision cleared, the abyss wasn't just staring back anymore. It was spilling out. It had no shape human eyes could parse, only segments of iridescent, chitinous carapace that folded in on themselves like a topological Möbius strip, each edge sharp enough to shear through durasteel plating. A maw gaped at its front, not a mouth but a rent in reality, oozing a viscous black fluid that vaporized on contact with the chamber's bulkhead, eating through inch-thick alloy in half a second. Tendrils uncoiled from its sides, each tipped with clusters of blinking, milky eyes that wept streaks of ionized plasma. Sensors are garbage, Ree's voice cut through the comms, tight with the kind of stress only a long-haul sensor tech ever heard. Mass readings are negative. It's not pushing matter away, it's pulling it. Every gram in this chamber is drifting toward that maw. Vega, pull your fighter back, you're drifting into its gravity well. Vega didn't listen. His railgun flashed once, a tungsten slug streaking straight for the entity's central carapace. Jax shouted the order before the shot even connected, but it was too late. The round didn't explode. It vanished into the maw and the entity pulsed, a low thrum vibrating through every bone in Jax's skull. A new tendril unfurled, twice as long as the last, and swatted a parked alien shuttle like it was a gnat, crumpling the craft into a ball of molten scrap. I told you, Jax's voice was iron, no room for argument. Weapons only on my mark, cease fire all units, throttle back to 30% burn, maintain 500-meter standoff. Do not let your comm signature lock onto its biofield. The entity didn't charge, it flowed, segments shifting as it moved across the chamber floor, leaving trails of that corrosive black fluid that ate through the decking under its weight. The labyrinth walls around them reconfigured spiked traps that had been primed to impale their fighters 5 seconds earlier, retracting into the floor gravity dampeners that had been pinning their nav systems shut, powering down. The mothership wasn't fighting them anymore. It was clearing a path for the thing. Command is cutting our priority channel, Ree said, static crackling over the line as he pulled the fleet frequency. They picked up the entity's energy signature 30 seconds ago. Capital Wing is 12 minutes out at max burn, but if that thing breaches the engineering core 2 clicks aft, it'll emit a reality collapse pulse. Wipes every unshielded system in a 3 light-year radius. Half the outer rim colonies go dark if that happens. A flare of red lit up Jax's tactical display. Kale, the newest pilot in the squadron, had drifted 200 meters too close. Her fighter's sensor pod caught on a stray tendril that phased straight through her starboard hull. Her comms erupted with panicked shouting, thrusters firing wild as she tried to yank free. Kale, cut your thrusters, Jax barked, keeping his tone level, no hint of the fear coiling in his gut. That tendril feeds on kinetic energy. The harder you pull, the tighter it holds. Vent your port side fuel cells, blow the pod free. Do it now. She hesitated half a second, then followed the order. The fuel cell detonated, shoving her fighter clear, the sensor pod vanishing into the entity's maw. Jax didn't have time to check if she was okay. Ree's next warning made his blood run cold. It's not heading for us, it's heading for the engineering core. The seal on that chamber is rated for 10,000 years of containment. It's already cracked 30% of the way through. If it gets through that door, we're not just dead, we're erased. T-minus 87 seconds to full breach. Vega's voice came over the comms, steady for the first time since the cocoon split. The panic burned out of him by the weight of what was coming. Command, this is Vega, ASF 7. Requesting permission to engage the primary limb with heavy rail. I've got a clean shot. Jax's finger hovered over his own weapon's trigger, his tactical display locking onto the entity's central mass. Permit wait. The entity's maw opened wider, and a lance of that hunger radiance poured out, straight for Vega's fighter. The beam hit his forward shielding, and the alarms on Jax's own display lit up as the shielding percentage dropped from 100 to 12 in half a second. Chapter 3, Episode 4, ASF. The beam tore through Vega's shielding like paper. His fighter spun, alarms shrieking, hull integrity collapsing. Jax's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and surgical. Vega, eject. Now there was no hesitation. Vega's pod blasted free, tumbling into the void as his fighter disintegrated in a flare of molten fragments. The entity's radiance swallowed the wreckage, feeding on it, growing brighter. Ree's voice was clipped, precise, every syllable a scalpel. Containment breach at 62%, 41 seconds until full compromise. Engineering core is the only thing keeping that thing from spreading into the mothership's spinal conduits. If it gets loose, it'll cascade through every deck. Kale's fighter rejoined formation, her breathing audible over comms, ragged but steady. We can't kill it with conventional fire. Railguns just feed it, thrusters feed it. Anything kinetic is a gift. Jax's tactical mind ran cold calculations. The alien empires had underestimated humanity for centuries, dismissing them as primitive opportunists. But humans had learned to weaponize restraint. Calm under annihilation was their sharpest blade. Switch to null-charge rounds, Jax ordered. No kinetic blade, aim for the limb junctions, sever its reach before it breaches the core. The squadron adjusted instantly. Railgun capacitors cycled, loading rounds designed to collapse into inert mass on impact. No energy transfer, no feast for the entity. Fire on my mark. Jax's tone was iron. 3, 2, 1. The volley struck. The entity recoiled, its tendrils spasming, the hunger radiance flickering. For the first time it faltered. Ree's console spat data. Containment breach stalled at 68%. It's resisting, but the null rounds are starving it. Keep pressure. Kale's voice steadied, confidence returning. We can pin it, starve it long enough for the seal to reassert. But the entity adapted, its maw convulsed, emitting a pulse not of energy but of silence, an anti-resonance wave. The squadron's comms fractured, static flooding channels. Jax's display glitched, tactical overlays collapsing. Stay tight, Jax barked, forcing his systems to manual. Visual targeting only, no sensors. Trust your eyes, the fighters closed ranks, weaving through the mothership's fractured corridors. Alien glyphs glowed faintly on the walls, remnants of the empire that had built this tomb. Their arrogance had been their undoing, believing they could cage a cosmic predator for eternity. Humanity had inherited their failure. Kale's fighter skimmed a ruptured bulkhead, her voice cutting through the static. Visual lock on primary limb, firing, her null round struck true. The limb convulsed, severed, drifting into the void. The entity shrieked not in sound, but in a psychic pressure that hammered every mind in range. Vega's pod spun uncontrolled, caught in the psychic storm. His voice was faint, strained. It's inside, trying to peel me open. Jax's jaw clenched. Tractor beam, get him out. Ree's systems hummed, locking onto Vega's pod. The beam pulled, dragging him clear of the entity's reach. Vega gasped, the pressure easing. Containment breach stabilized at 72%, Ree reported. It's holding but barely, we need a decisive strike. Jax's eyes narrowed. The entity was learning, adapting faster than their weapons could counter. Null rounds bought time, but not victory. The mothership's engineering core was the fulcrum. If they could overload the containment seal, collapse it inward, they might rebind the entity. Kale, prep overload sequence. Vega, stay dark, conserve oxygen. Command will need proof we can cage this thing. Kale hesitated. Overload risks total core implosion, will be vaporized. Jax's tone was calm, surgical. Better vaporized than erased. Execute. The fighters dove toward the engineering core. Alien conduits pulsed with failing energy, the seal's glyphs flickering. The entity's tendrils hammered against the barrier, each strike shaking the mothership's spine. Ree's hands flew across her console. Overload sequence armed, 30 seconds to detonation. Kale's fighter locked into position, her system syncing with Ree's. Sequence stable, awaiting final command. The entity sensed the threat. Its maw widened, radiance surging, tendrils lashing. One struck Kale's fighter, ripping half her wing away. She spun, alarm screaming. I'm hit, stabilizers gone. Jax's voice cut through, steady as steel. Hold formation, you're still in the fight. Kale gritted her teeth, forcing her crippled fighter into position. The overload sequence ticked down, 10 seconds. The entity's radiance surged, a final desperate strike. It poured hunger into the seal, cracking glyphs, shattering conduits. The breach leapt to 91%, 5 seconds. Jax's finger hovered over the trigger. His squadron's lives balanced against the survival of humanity. Alien empires had failed here. Humanity would not. 3 seconds. The entity's maw lunged, radiance flooding the chamber. 1 second, Jax fired, the overload detonated. The engineering core imploded, collapsing inward, dragging the entity with it. Tendrils snapped, radiance extinguished. The maw shrieked, folding into the seal as glyphs flared one final time. Silence. Ree's voice was a whisper. Containment restored, entity bound, for now. Kale's fighter drifted, crippled but intact. Vega's pod stabilized, tractor beam holding. The squadron floated in the wreckage, hearts pounding, minds scarred. Jax exhaled, his tone calm, unyielding. Command ASF 7, target contained, engineering core compromised but functional. Humanity holds the line. The mothership's corridors echoed with silence, the arrogance of alien empires buried in their own tomb. Humanity had stared into the abyss and refused to blink. But deep within the seal, the entity pulsed once, faint but deliberate. It was not defeated, only waiting. Alarms screamed across Zalthar 9 corroded corridors, the deep, groaning protest of the derelict mothership's hull vibrating through every bulkhead as the overload's aftershocks settled. Kale's fighter drifted 200 meters from the engineering access port, cockpit fogged with acrid smoke from her port thrusters' burnt-out wiring. She wiped blood from a cut above her eyebrow, keying her comms to the squadron frequency. "Jax, you seeing that energy spike in the seal, not just residual discharge?" Jax's voice came back sharp, no trace of the exhaustion pulling at his own frayed flight suit. "Negative, running full spectrum on the glyph matrix now. Confirm." Ree's reply crackled a half-second later, the hum of his diagnostic rig loud in the background. "Confirmed." Low-frequency harmonic, 0.3 Hz, matches the entity's pre-implosion output. It's not dormant. It's siphoning energy off the overload's leftover flux. Breach risk jumped from 0% to 7% in the last 2 minutes. Before Jax could respond, perimeter proximity alarms blared across the entire ASF fleet. 3 Crawl Raider frigates decloaked from the debris cloud 40 clicks out, their jagged bone-plated hulls glinting with tech scavenged from a dozen lost human border colonies. Plasma cannons flared, bolts slamming into the lead ASF destroyer's forward shields. "All hands brace for impact," Jax ordered, his team shifting to cover the engineering access port's only entryway. Sato, their heavy weapons specialist, hefted his Gauss rifle, the barrel still warm from suppressing fire on the entity's tendrils 10 minutes prior. "Crawl hostiles 12 o'clock low, 3 bogies, frigate class. Kale, clear to engage on my mark." Kale's fighter lurched forward, its single functional thruster sputtering as she adjusted her flight path. "Copy. ETA to firing position 90 seconds. Weapons are running on half charge, only getting 2 missile shots before I'm dry." A Crawl plasma bolt slammed into the mothership's outer hull 30 meters from the access port, sending a shower of molten alien alloy raining down into the corridor. Jax yanked his team back behind a bulkhead, Sato's helmet taking a glancing hit that sparked his comms. "Sato's hit minor, suit integrity holds, medic, patch him up." "Nobody leaves this post." Jax keyed the fleet command frequency, his tone flat, no room for negotiation. "Command ASF 7, 3 Crawl frigates engaging our perimeter. Seal integrity is degrading, entity is active under the matrix. Requesting permission to deploy scuttle charges if the Crawl breach the core access." The Admiral's voice came back a second later, tight with the weight of the 12 colonial outposts waiting for the entity's containment to hold. "Permission granted ASF 7, do not let that thing loose. Reinforcements are 8 minutes out, hold the line." Kale's fighter crested the edge of the mothership's upper hull, locking onto the lead Crawl frigate's weapons array. She squeezed the trigger, 2 anti-armor missiles streaking forward, slamming into the frigate's cannon ports in a burst of fire and twisted metal. The frigate's port guns went dark, but its starboard batteries swiveled, a plasma bolt slamming directly into Kale's fighter's starboard wing. Sparks showered across her cockpit display, her altitude alarms blaring. "I'm hit, starboard wing S folding," she gritted out, wrestling the controls as her fighter spiraled toward the mothership's hull. "Jax, I'm dropping the last of my chaff. Cover me when I land." Jax watched as Kale's fighter skidded along the hull, coming to a stop 50 meters from the access port. He'd the comms to Ree, who was hunched over the seal's diagnostic panel, sweat beading on his forehead. "Ree, how long before the seal blows?" Ree's fingers flew across his panel, his voice tight. "That Crawl hit shook the core conduits. Breach is at 12% and climbing. If they hit us with capital fire again, the glyphs shatter in 4 minutes. The entity will be loose before reinforcements arrive." A second Crawl frigate swiveled its main cannon, charging a plasma bolt the size of a shuttle. Jax looked at the scuttle charge clipped to his belt, the timer already counting down from 60 seconds, then at the seal flickering under his team's cover. He keyed the comms to the entire squadron, his voice steady, unyielding. "Kale, get to cover. I'm planting the scuttle charge. If the Crawl want the core, they're gonna get a blast big enough to take half this sector with it." Kale's cockpit hatch exploded outward a half-second after Jax's comms cut off, twisted metal and sparking wiring raining onto the hull's oozing violet biolayer. She hauled herself out, starboard wing crumpled against her thigh, and didn't waste a second checking for injuries. Her HUD flashed oxygen leak warnings, but the derelict's thin residual atmosphere was breathable for the next 10 minutes, enough. Her boots skidded on the slime coating the hull, teeth gritted as she half ran, half stumbled toward the half-blasted access bulkhead Ree had pried open 12 minutes prior, magnetic mag boots locking into the hull plating with sharp clinks every third step. "Ree, talk to me," she barked, slamming her back against the bulkhead, rifle raised to cover the open access port. Her scope picked up the Crawl frigate's main cannon, the maw glowing brighter by the second, plasma ionizing so fast the air around it shimmered. Ree's voice came back crackling, sharp with strain. Breach is at 22% and climbing. Those glyphs are unstable as hell. If that frigate lands a direct hit, the seal shatters in 3 minutes tops. I can hear it scratching on the other side. It's awake. Jax kicked his own cockpit open 3 meters from Kale, the scuttle charge clipped to his belt beeping a steady, rising tone. He didn't answer, just hauled himself across the hull, the charge's magnetic clamps biting into the plating as he slid to a stop next to the core conduit access panel bolted directly above the seal Ree was monitoring. His fingers flew over the charge's interface, wiring it into the conduit's overload circuit in one smooth motion, no fumbling, no wasted movement. Timer S at 38 seconds on arming, he called over his shoulder, not looking away from the panel. Triggers set to dual, crawl capital fire detonates it, or I pull manual if the seal hits 50% breach. Either way, that frigate doesn't walk away with our core and that thing inside doesn't get out. The crawl frigate's cannon flared white-hot, the plasma bolt forming at the maw, big enough to punch through the mothership's outer hull and the access bulkhead in one go. Kale's finger tightened on her rifle trigger, but before the bolt could fire, a small boarding pod launched from the frigate's underbelly, thrusters flaring blue as it barreled straight for the access port. "Hold fire," Jax yelled, seeing the pod. "If we blow that charge early, we lose the seal. If they board, they can shut down the overload before it detonates." He slammed the final coupling into place on the scuttle charge, the beeping tone shifting to a steady, low hum. Arming complete, 12 seconds until it's live. Kale tracked the boarding pod, her scope locking onto its thruster port. It was 180 meters out, closing fast, crawl borders visible through the pod's viewport, rifles raised. She held her breath, waited until the pod was 120 meters out, then squeezed the trigger. Her plasma bolt slammed into the thruster, blowing it out clean, the pod veering hard to starboard, slamming into the hull 20 meters from the access port with a deafening crunch, exploding into a shower of molten metal and crawl body parts. Debris skittered across the hull, one chunk slamming into the crawl frigate's forward sensor array, sending up a shower of sparks. The frigate's cannon powered down for half a second, then flared brighter than before, the new bolt twice the size of the last. Ree screamed over the comms, his voice cracking. "Seal S at 48%, the glyphs are cracking. I see something moving behind it, tentacles. I think they're reaching through the gaps." Jax's eyes locked on the scuttle charge's trigger panel, then up at the incoming plasma bolt, then back to the access port where a thin, pale, slime-coated tendril was poking through the cracked seal, twitching as it tasted the air. The crawl bolt was 300 meters out, closing fast. The scuttle charge's arming timer hit 0 with a soft chime. His finger hovered over the manual trigger, jaw tight. "Kale, get clear of the bulkhead," he said, voice dead calm, no trace of the fear he had to be feeling. "Ree, brace for shockwave. Either that bolt hits and we go up with the whole sector, or I trigger it early and we pray the collapse holds that thing inside." Jax's finger didn't tremble when he slammed the manual trigger. The gravitic scuttle charge didn't roar like conventional explosives. It whined, a high-pitched frequency that made his teeth ache, as the 10-meter swath of hull plating around the access port crumpled inward, warped by a microwarp field designed to compress alloy into a solid, unbreakable mass. The glowing glyphs sealing the ancient hatch flared so bright they bleached his HUD white for half a second, then fizzled out as the warped metal pinched the pale, slime-coated tendril clean off the hatch's edge. The severed end thrashed for 3 full seconds, oozing iridescent black ichor that sizzled and smoked when it hit the hull, before going limp. Kale was already braced in the recessed hull cover, his mag boots locked tight to the plating, one hand clamped to the edge of the cover, the other steadying his fléchette rifle. The shockwave hit a half-second later, slamming his helmet against the plating hard enough to rattle his teeth, but he didn't break position. Hull's holding. "No breaches on our side," he yelled over the comms, his voice rough, the scar over his left eyebrow pulled tight as he scanned the crumpled hull for more movement. "Tendrils cut, thing S not getting out that way." Ree's voice crackled in next, half-laugh, half-sob, static cutting through every other word as he stared at the diagnostics panel propped on his engineering nook's edge, 3 meters below the access port. "Seal S at 0, glyphs are gone, wait, fuck, the collapse didn't seal the whole gap. There's a fist-sized opening under the warped plating, right above the inner hatch. Hull's trembling, I can feel it through the console. It's pushing," his fingers flew across the panel, and a second later he cursed in fluent crawl, the alien gutturals sharp and angry. "Pressure's spiking inside the hatch. Whatever that thing is, it's not happy we cut its tentacle off." The incoming crawl plasma bolt slammed into the crumpled hull section 50 meters out, 3 tons of superheated plasma hitting the gravitic compressed alloy. The hull glowed cherry red in an instant, but didn't breach. The warped metal was denser than the frigate's forward cannon could punch through. The cannon powered down for a full second, then the frigate's open comms blared, guttural, furious, the universal translator spitting out stilted, broken human. Cease fire, identify your vessel, you have activated forbidden technology. Surrender your crew and the sealed artifact, or we will reduce your hull to debris. Jax pushed himself off the scuttle charge panel, his suit's joint servos whining from the shockwave impact. He wiped a streak of the thing's ichor off his HUD, the rot-sweet, iron tang of the slime seeping through his suit's filters, even after he activated the air scrubber override. "Reed, can you seal that gap?" His voice was flat, no trace of the adrenaline spike thrumming in his veins, the same steady tone he used when he was calling in airstrikes on hostile encampments back during the Titan campaign. "I'm rerouting auxiliary power to the hull welders now," Reed yelled back, his fingers flying so fast over his console they were a blur. 10 seconds max. "Kale, watch that gap. If that thing shoves a bigger tentacle through before the weld sets, it'll punch through the plating like it's wet paper." Kale shifted his stance, rifle raised, the flechette rounds glinting in the dim red glow of the hull's emergency strips. He spotted movement under the warped plating, pale, slimy, shifting, like something was pressing hard against the inside of the hull. "Got movement. It's widening the gap. I can see the edge of a claw. No, another tentacle thicker than the last one. It's not through yet, but it's working." The frigate fired again, a smaller, focused bolt aimed directly at the gap Reed was trying to weld. Jack saw it arcing in, grabbed Kale's shoulder harness, and yanked him back half a second before the bolt slammed into the spot he'd been standing, melting the hull plating into molten slag that dripped down toward the lower hull, glowing bright orange. The heat alarm blared in his helmet, and he slapped the override jaw tight. Faster," he ordered, no yelling, just a flat, cold command that cut through the comm static. "The crawler's zeroing in on that gap. If they blow it open before we seal it, we're not just dealing with the thing inside. We're dealing with a crawl boarding party that'll be through that hatch 30 seconds after they blow it." He primed his plasma rifle, the charge indicator glowing a steady, bright green. "Kale, if you get a clear shot at their cannon mount, take it. I'll hold the gap." Chapter 7, Episode 4. ASF. The crawl frigate's cannon mount rotated, its targeting array glowing with a predatory shimmer. Kale steadied his rifle, the flechette chamber humming as he locked onto the mount. His visor displayed the trajectory, the probability of penetration against the crawl's composite armor. He exhaled once, flat and controlled, then squeezed the trigger. The burst of flechettes tore across the void, a streak of tungsten needles that slammed into the cannon's stabilizer. Sparks erupted, the mount shuddered, and the frigate's next shot veered wide, carving molten scars across the mothership's hull but missing the gap entirely. "Confirmed hit," Kale reported, voice clipped. "Mount destabilized. They'll need a recalibration cycle." "Good," Jax replied, tone as calm as if he were reading a weather report. "That buys us 30 seconds. Status. Seal's holding at 70%, grunted, her welding torch spitting arcs of blue-white plasma. But the thing inside isn't giving up. Pressure's building, hull stress climbing past tolerance." The plating bulged outward, a grotesque ripple as something massive pressed against it. The emergency strips flickered, casting shadows that writhed like living things. Jax adjusted his stance, plasma rifle raised, eyes locked on the distortion. He didn't blink, he didn't flinch, he simply waited. The comms crackled, command channel. Admiral Vera's voice cut in, sharp and precise. "Team Echo, crawl reinforcements inbound. 2 destroyers vectoring toward your position. You have 4 minutes before they're in weapons range. Extraction window is closing." Jax's reply was immediate. "Understood, we hold until the seal completes. If the entity breaches, we fall back to secondary containment. Kale, cover arcs. Finish the weld. Admiral, prep orbital strike coordinates in case we lose containment." There was a pause, then Vera's voice returned, colder than the void. "Orbital strike authorized, but if you fail, Echo, you won't have time to clear the blast radius." Jax didn't acknowledge, he didn't need to. Everyone on the team knew the stakes. The plating convulsed again. A claw, no, a serrated appendage punched through, dripping translucent ichor that hissed as it touched the molten slag. The weld flared, struggling to hold. Cursed under her breath, torch pressed harder against the breach. "It's forcing through. I can't hold it," Jax ordered, voice flat steel. He fired, plasma bolts slamming into the appendage. The creature recoiled, shrieking in a frequency that rattled their helmets. The sound wasn't just noise, it was pressure, a psychic resonance that clawed at their thoughts. Kale staggered, teeth clenched, vision blurring. "It's in my head," he muttered, shaking it off. "Trying to push, block it," Jax snapped. "Focus on the mission, ignore the noise." Kale steadied, rifle raised again. He fired another burst, shredding the appendage as it tried to force the gap wider. The ichor sprayed, sizzling against the plating. Seized the moment, torch blazing, sealing the breach another few centimeters. 90%, almost there. The frigate fired again, its destabilized cannon mount struggling to lock. The bolt slammed into the mothership's hull, but the angle was off. The plating held. Kale smirked, grim satisfaction in his voice. They're losing precision. We've got them rattled. Don't underestimate them, Jax replied. Crawl arrogance is dangerous, but desperation makes them lethal. The mothership shuddered, a deep vibration that resonated through the plating. The entity inside wasn't finished. It pressed harder, tentacles writhing against the weld, claws scraping, ichor seeping. The hull screamed under the strain. Rhee's torch sputtered, fuel reserves dropping. I'm out in 10 seconds. Finish it, Jax commanded. Kale, suppress the frigate. Keep them off us. Kale fired again, fléchettes hammering into the frigate's hull. The crawl responded with return fire, smaller cannons spitting bursts of plasma. The impacts rocked the mothership, shockwaves reverberating through the plating. Jax braced, rifle steady, eyes locked on the breach. He fired again, plasma bolts searing into the writhing mass. The creature shrieked, recoiling once more. Rhee's torch flared one last time, then died. She pulled back, panting. Seal complete, 98%. It'll hold for now. Jax lowered his rifle slightly, eyes still on the plating. The bulges subsided, the tentacles retreating. The hull quieted, though the shadows still writhed. He exhaled once, controlled. Containment achieved. Admiral, breach sealed. Entity suppressed. Vera's voice returned, clipped. Good, destroyers are closing. Extraction vector is live. Move now. Jax turned to his team. Kale, Rhee, fall back to shuttle. Maintain cover arcs. We're not clear until we're off this hull. Kale nodded, rifle raised, scanning the void. Rhee secured her gear, torch clipped to her harness. They moved precise and disciplined, retreating toward the shuttle docked against the mothership's flank. The frigate fired again, but its destabilized mount sent the bolt wide. Kale returned fire, fléchettes tearing into its hull. Sparks erupted, the frigate listing slightly. Admiral, Jax said, voice calm. Recommend orbital strike on frigate. Destroyers will adapt. We need to cut their support. Coordinates locked, Vera replied. Strike inbound. Clear the blast radius. Jax and his team reached the shuttle, boarding in silence. The hatch sealed, engines ignited. The shuttle detached, thrusters firing, pulling away from the mothership. Behind them, the frigate shuddered as the orbital strike slammed into it, a lance of energy tearing through its hull. The explosion lit the void, fragments scattering, the frigate reduced to molten wreckage. Kale watched from the viewport, eyes narrowed. 1 down, 2 to go. Jax sat in the command seat, rifle across his lap, eyes cold. We bought time, but the entity's still inside, and the crawl aren't finished. This was just the opening move. The shuttle accelerated, engines roaring, streaking toward the extraction vector. Behind them, the mothership loomed, sealed but not silent. The shadows within still writhed, waiting, watching, hungering. Jax's voice cut through the silence, calm and final. Prepare for phase 2. This war isn't against the crawl alone, it's against whatever they woke, and we're the only line between it and the rest of humanity. The shuttle's cabin hummed with the low thrum of thrusters fighting to maintain Vector 7, the sharp tang of burnt insulation and stale recycled air hanging thick in the cabin. Jax stared through the viewport, the 2 crawled destroyers burning hard away from the human fleet's forward line, their bow cannons trailing blue plasma exhaust as they bore down on the derelict mothership's ventral hull. No return fire pinged the human fleet's tactical net. Hale's cruisers had held fire the second the crawl broke formation, per Jax's earlier order to avoid stray impacts triggering the entity's full awakening. Admiral Hale, report, Jax said, keying the fleet channel, his voice flat, no wasted inflection. They're not responding to Hale's crackling reply came through a second later, shields holding 92% across both destroyers. Flight path is locked, they're targeting lower hangar bay 3, mark 3.2 on the mothership's hull grid, no sign they're adjusting for our fleet's position. Jax's jaw tightened. Hangar Bay 3 was where the initial crawl breach had woken the entity, where the primary containment seal was laid over the access tunnel leading to the ship's core. Vera, pull any crawl burst traffic you can grab, now. Vera's fingers flew across her console, the decryption software spitting out partial text 3 seconds later. Got a command burst from Crawl High Command, timestamped 90 seconds out. They've reclassified the mothership as Class Omega retrieval target. All crawl assets in sector are ordered to secure the void artifact stored in Hangar Bay 3, no matter the cost to fleet assets. She paused, her tone sharpening. Also picking up active breaching signals from both destroyers. They're deploying 4 fast skiffs. Each one's loaded with shaped charges calibrated to blow the containment seal over the hangar access. Kale leaned forward from the viewport, his rifle across his knees, fléchette rounds glinting in the cabin light. If they blow that seal, the entity breaks loose before we can deploy the containment net. And if they grab that artifact, they'll haul it back to the crawl core, reverse engineer whatever control they think they have over it, and we're looking at a full-scale invasion within 6 months. Hale's voice cut back in, urgent this time. Sensors are picking up the skiffs launching. ETA to hull contact, 45 seconds. If I order the fleet to engage the destroyers now, our railguns will tear through their shields, but overpenetration will hit the mothership's hull. That kind of energy signature will wake the entity immediately, no question. And the crawl will still have time to plant those charges before their destroyers go down. Jack stared at the mothership's looming dark hull on the viewport, the faint, almost imperceptible ripple of shadow moving under its outer plating. The entity was already half awake. He could feel the low thrum of it vibrating through the shuttle's hull, a quiet, hungry hum that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. If the crawl planted those charges, the seal would blow, and whatever was inside would spill out into the void, untethered, uncontained. "Turn us around," Jack said, no hesitation. Heading back to the mothership. "Kale, grab your breaching kit, 2 extra mags of flechettes. We're taking the skiffs out before they reach the hangar and disarming those charges before they blow." Kale was already standing, slinging his rifle over his shoulder, a sharp grin cutting across his face. "Took you long enough to say it." The shuttle's thrusters fired hard, the deck tilting as Jax burned back toward the mothership's ventral hull. The first crawl skiff touched down on the derelict plating 20 seconds later, 4 crawl warriors pouring out, plasma cutters humming as they sprinted for the containment seal. The entity's energy signature spiked so high the shuttle's sensors flickered, a low, guttural thrum rolling through the hull like the growl of something huge stirring from a millennia-long sleep. Somewhere deep inside the mothership, a cluster of glowing red eyes opened in the dark. Word count 982, Chapter 9, Episode 4. ASF. The shuttle's hull reverberated with the entity's pulse, a rhythm that was not sound but pressure, a vibration that gnawed at the bones. Jack steadied himself against the console, eyes locked on the crawl skiffs crawling across the mothership's ventral plating. Their cutters sparked against the ancient alloy, arcs of blue fire slicing toward the containment seal. If they breached it, the thing inside would not stay dormant, it would not stay contained. Kale's suppressive fire keep them off the seal. Kale's rifle barked, flechettes streaking across the void, puncturing 2 crawl warriors mid-stride, their bodies folded, drifting weightless before tumbling into the abyss. The other 2 dropped low, shields flaring, cutters still chewing at the plating. 2 down, 2 working, Kale reported, voice clipped calm. Jax keyed the thrusters, angling the shuttle closer. "We're boarding." No time to play sniper. The shuttle slammed against the mothership's hull with a metallic crunch, magnetic clamps locked. Jax was already moving, helmet sealed, breaching kit slung. The hatch hissed open and the void swallowed them. The mothership's surface stretched endless, a graveyard of alien architecture. Plates of black alloy scarred by millennia hummed faintly with the entity's pulse. Jax's boots magnetized, each step dragging against the hull. Kale followed, rifle raised, visor scanning. The crawl warriors turned, cutters abandoned, plasma rifles snapping up. "Contact front," Kale said, already firing. The exchange was brutal, precise. Flechettes shredded 1 crawl shield, punching through the warrior's chest. Plasma bolts scorched across the plating, 1 grazing Kale's shoulder armor, leaving a molten scar. Jax closed the distance, breaching kit in hand, slamming a charge into the cutter rig. The rig detonated, fragments scattering into the void. The last crawl lunged, blade drawn, a serrated arc meant to split Jax's visor. Jax caught the wrist, twisted, and drove his combat knife through the alien's throat. The warrior convulsed, then went limp, drifting away. Kale exhaled, scanning the seal. Charges are primed, they were seconds from blowing it. Jax crouched, eyes narrowing at the alien devices fused to the plating. The charges pulsed faintly, synchronized with the entity's heartbeat. "Disarm sequence won't hold, they're tied into the mothership's power grid. We cut them, we trigger them." Kale's jaw tightened. "Options." Jax's gaze flicked to the seal itself, an immense circular plate etched with runes that glowed faintly red. The entity's eyes, buried deep within, pulsed in rhythm. "We reroute, feed the charges into the mothership's own containment field, let the ship swallow the blast." Kale hesitated. "If the field fails, it won't," Jax said, voice flat. "This ship was built to cage gods, we trust the cage." Kale knelt, fingers flying across the alien interface. His visor projected schematics, lines of power conduits threading into the seal. "Rerouting now." 30 seconds, the entity stirred. The plating beneath their boots rippled as though something massive shifted beneath the surface. A guttural hum rolled through the hull, deeper, hungrier. Jax felt it in his chest, a vibration that threatened to unmake thought itself. Kale's voice cut through the static. "Reroute complete, charges feeding into containment." The devices flared, then dissolved into the plating, absorbed by the seal. The runes brightened, red shifting to harsh white. The hum subsided, replaced by a silence so sharp it felt like pressure. Jax straightened, scanning the void. Crawl reinforcements inbound, 2 more skiffs, vectoring fast. Kale's grin was sharp, feral. Round 2, the skiffs broke atmosphere, thrusters burning, warriors spilling out. Plasma fire streaked across the hull, bolts hammering against their position. Jax dropped low, returning fire, flechettes slicing through shields. Kale moved like a predator rifle, snapping precise bursts, each shot a kill. But the entity was not silent. The seal pulsed again, faint cracks spidering across its surface. The mothership groaned, a sound that was not mechanical but alive. Jax's comm crackled. Command's voice tight with urgency. Jax, status. The entity's energy signature is spiking across the sector. Crawl fleets are converging. You have minutes before this turns into a war zone. Jax's reply was cold steel. Charges neutralized, seal holding for now, but the Crawl know what's inside, they won't stop. Kale dropped another warrior, visor flashing with target locks. Then neither do we. The second wave faltered under their fire, bodies scattering across the void, but the skiffs kept coming, shadows against the stars. Jax's eyes locked on the seal. The cracks widened, light bleeding through. The entity's eyes glowed brighter, a cluster of red burning in the dark. It was awake enough to notice, awake enough to hunger. Kale, Jax said, voice low, if that seal breaks, it won't matter who wins this fight. Human Crawl Empire, it eats everything. Kale's grin faded, replaced by grim resolve. Then we hold the line long enough for command to bring the fleet. Jax nodded once, calm, terrifyingly calm. We hold. The mothership shuddered, the void trembling with the weight of something vast pressing against its cage. The Crawl skiffs swarmed, plasma fire raining down. Jax and Kale stood against it, rifles barking, charges primed, every move precise. Above them, the seal glowed white-hot, runes burning, cracks spreading. The entity pressed harder, its hunger bleeding into the void. And in that moment, as the clash raged across the mothership's hull, Jax understood this was not a battle against the Crawl. This was a battle against time, against the cage itself, against the thing that had slept for eons and now stirred, ready to devour stars. He chambered another round, visor locking on the next wave. Kale, no retreat. Kale's rifle snapped up, eyes hard. No retreat. The void erupted in fire. The seal screamed. The entity reached. And humanity stood, calm and unyielding, against the hunger of gods. The Crawl skiffs raked the mothership's flank with overlapping plasma lances, each bolt carving shallow trenches into the alloy skin. Jax felt the vibration through his boot soles, a low thrum that matched the pulse of the seal's failing runes. Above them, the white-hot glyphs flared brighter, then dimmed as the entity's pressure shifted, as if testing the limits of its prison. Status on the charge, Jax barked, eyes flicking to the HUD projected onto his visor. The counter read 0.3 seconds to full discharge. Kale's fingers danced over the trigger guard, his rifle already hot from sustained fire. Charge ready. EMP pulse set to 0 point. If we blow now, we'll fry the seal's lattice and buy us minutes, not seconds. A Crawl fighter swooped low, its wings shearing through a cloud of ionized debris. Plasma spat from its cannons, striking the hull a meter from Jax's position. The impact sent a spray of molten metal across his shoulder plate. The ablative coating hissed, then held. Take the left flank, Jax said, voice flat. I'll cover the seal. Kale nodded, slipping behind a bulkhead ridge that offered a thin slab of shadow. He squeezed off 3 rounds, each finding a cockpit viewport. The Crawl pilot's visor flared, then went dark as the round pierced the coolant line, sending a spray of freezing vapor that froze the pilot's limbs mid-maneuver. Jax moved to the seal's edge, where the runes pulsed like a wounded heart. He placed his palm against the cold metal, feeling the resonance of the entity's hunger through the substrate, a low, invasive throb that tried to sync with his own heartbeat. He forced his breathing to stay even, refusing to let the rhythm dictate his actions. A transmission crackled in his ear, fragmented but intelligible. Fleet ETA, 9 minutes, hold. The voice was Commander Vrel, strained by distance and interference. Copy, Jax replied, keeping his tone devoid of emotion. We'll hold. The Crawl's swarm intensified, their ships forming a loose lattice that funneled fire toward the central hub where the seal glowed. Plasma bolts struck the hull in rapid succession, creating a lattice of incandescent scars. Each hit sent a shockwave through the deck plates, threatening to rupture the already weakened containment field. Jax activated his suit's magnetic grips, anchoring himself to a girder as a nearby bulkhead buckled under the strain. He pulled a compact grav charge from his belt, set it to a delayed detonation, and tossed it into the throat of a Crawl fighter that had dove too close. The charge latched onto the ship's hull, its timer blinking red. 3 seconds later, a localized implosion sucked the fighter's engine core inward, collapsing the vessel into a twisted knot of metal that spun away, dragging 2 neighboring skiffs with it in a vortex of debris. Kale, meanwhile, had shifted to a defensive posture on the opposite ridge, his rifle now feeding from a drum magazine that showed 27 rounds left. He fired in controlled bursts, each trio of shots aimed at the Crawl's wing joints, disabling their maneuverability without wasting ammunition on armor that would shrug off a single hit. The entity's pressure against the seal grew, the cracks widening like a mouth opening. Light poured through the fissures, not as illumination but as a raw, invasive radiance that painted the interior of Jax's helmet with a sickly crimson hue. He could feel the heat on his skin, a sensation that seeped through the suit's thermal layers, threatening to cook the circuitry if he lingered too long. Seal's integrity at 42%, the suit's AI whispered, tone neutral. Projected breach in 3 minutes if external force not reduced. Jax glanced at the chronometer etched into his visor, SHUD 0257. He needed to buy those minutes. He slipped a demolition charge from his pack, set it to a low-yield directional blast, and positioned it against the inner rim of the seal where the runes were thickest. The charge would not destroy the seal. It would create a controlled counterpulse, a brief surge of opposing energy meant to destabilize the entity's grasp long enough for the fleet's arrival. "Kale, on my mark," Jax said, keeping his voice low enough that only the comms picked it up. Kale's eyes flicked to him, then back to the crawl formation tightening like a fist. "Mark," Jax depressed the trigger. The charge emitted a sharp, concave wave of electromagnetic flux that slammed into the seal's inner surface. The runes flared, then sputtered as the wave intersected the entity's pressure, creating a visible distortion, a ripple in the air that looked like heat haze over desert sand. The entity recoiled, a soundless shudder that translated into a sudden drop in the radiant flood pouring through the cracks. The seal's glow steadied, the white-hot glyphs pulsing at a steadier rhythm, but the crawl did not pause. Their commander, a towering figure in obsidian armor, signaled a new wave. 6 frigates broke from the main swarm, their hulls bristling with missile pods. Missiles launched, trailing plasma tails, arcing toward the mothership's midsection where Jax and Kale stood. Jax's visor flashed a warning, incoming missiles, impact in 12 seconds. He grabbed Kale's arm. "Take cover behind the conduit stack, I'll draw fire the missile defense." Kale slid behind a thick pipe bundle, his rifle ready, while Jax activated the ship's point defense grid, a network of railguns embedded in the hull, normally reserved for anti-ship combat. He routed power from auxiliary systems, diverting 15% of the ship's remaining flux to the guns. The first missile struck the deflector's shield a kilometer away, detonating in a bloom of ionized plasma that washed over the hull like a solar flare. The second and third were intercepted by the railguns, kinetic penetrators punching through their casings and causing premature detonations that scattered shrapnel harmlessly into the void. 4 missiles slipped through the grid, their guidance locked onto the seal's location. Jax saw the trajectories converge, the time to impact shrinking. He slapped a manual override on the defense console, forcing the remaining railguns to track the incoming salvo manually. His hands moved with practiced speed, adjusting azimuth and elevation as the missiles screamed closer. Impact. The first missile hit the outer plating just above the seal, the explosion tearing a jagged hole that sprayed molten alloy inward. The second struck the conduit stack where Kale had taken cover, the blast wave throwing him sideways. His suit's impact absorbers kicked in, sparing him serious injury but rattling his teeth. The third missile detonated against the seal itself, the blast coupling directly with the entity's pressure. For an instant, the seal's runes flared blinding white, then went dark as the energy overwhelmed them. The entity's hunger surged, a tendril of pure blackened force lancing through the breach, seeking to consume anything within reach. Jax felt the pull at the edge of his consciousness, a cold emptiness trying to erase thought. He clamped his jaw, forced his mind to focus on the tactical readout, seal integrity now at 12%, falling. He didn't hesitate. He ripped the final demolition charge from his belt, set it to maximum yield, and rammed it into the widening fissure where the entity's tendril probed. The charge's casing hissed as it sealed against the metal, the timer blinking 0005. "Kale, now." He shouted, voice raw but steady. Kale, bruised but upright, lunged from the conduit stack, slamming his shoulder into the missile-damaged hull to gain momentum. He grabbed the charge's activation lever and yanked it hard, overriding the safeties. The charge detonated. A sphere of violet-blue energy erupted outward, engulfing the seal, the tendril, and the immediate vicinity. The entity's scream, if it could be called that, was a sudden absence of sound, a vacuum that swallowed the ambient noise for a heartbeat before the rush of expanding gas filled the void. When the light dimmed, the seal was whole again, the runes glowing a steady amber, the cracks sealed by fused alloy and residual energy. The entity's presence receded, its pressure dropping to a faint throb at the edge of perception, still there but contained. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and the ragged breaths of the surviving crawl frigates, which, seeing their assault thwarted, began to retreat, their formations scattering like disturbed ash. Jax pushed himself to his feet, his suit's power levels flashing critical warnings. He checked Kale, who was already checking his own vitals, a thin line of blood tracing his temple from shrapnel. "Fleet ETA?" Jax asked, voice hoarse but clear. Kale checked the comms. 6 minutes. "They're picking up our distress beacon now." Jax looked out over the hull, the scarred surface glittering under the distant stars, the seal's amber glow a stubborn beacon against the dark. The crawl threat had been blunted for now, but the thing beyond the seal still stirred, a hunger that waited. He chambered another round, the action smooth, the weight familiar. "We hold," he said, the words low, devoid of flourish, a statement of fact rather than a vow. Kale slipped a fresh magazine into his rifle, the click echoing in the empty corridor. "We hold." Chapter 11, the amber line, the crawl retreat was not orderly. Their frigates bled plasma trails as they limped into the void, engines coughing ion bursts. Jax watched them scatter, his visor tracking each vector. He knew they weren't beaten, only buying time, regrouping, waiting for the seal to falter again. Kale's voice cut through the comms. 6 minutes until fleet arrival. That's assuming they don't hit resistance on the way. Jax adjusted his rifle's sling, the weapon heavy against his chest. 6 minutes is a lifetime out here. The mothership's hull groaned beneath them, a sound like tectonic plates shifting. The amber glow of the seal pulsed once, faint but deliberate, as if the thing inside was testing its prison. Jax felt the vibration in his bones, a reminder that the battle wasn't against the crawl alone. Kale crouched near the fused alloy, scanning the runes. Containment's holding, but it's not stable. The energy matrix is degrading faster than predicted. If the crawl knew that, they'll know, Jax said flatly. They always know. A sudden burst of static filled their comms, then a voice comm clipped, unmistakably human. "Admiral Rourke, Echo Team status." Jax keyed his mic. "Seal re-engage." "Crawl retreating, casualties heavy, we're holding position." Rourke's reply carried no sympathy, only calculation. "Fleet is inbound, priority is containment. If the entity breaches, protocol is full sterilization. That includes you." Kale's jaw tightened. "Understood." Jax didn't flinch. He'd heard worse. "Copy, will hold until relieved." The channel closed, leaving only the hiss of background radiation. Kale exhaled slowly. Sterilization, they'd burn the whole sector rather than risk it spreading. "They're right," Jax said. "One ship, one crew, one system, acceptable losses. The alternative is extinction." The mothership shifted again, a tremor running through its skeletal corridors. Panels buckled, releasing bursts of frozen vapor. Jax raised his rifle, scanning the shadows. Then movement, not crawl, not human, something else. Ripple of darkness slid across the corridor, a distortion in the air like heat shimmer. It coalesced into a shape, angular, predatory, half-seen. The seal pulsed brighter as if reacting. Kale's voice was low, steady. "Contact unknown." Jax fired. The round cracked through the distortion, sparking against alloy. The shape recoiled, then dissolved into mist. Kale checked his sensors. No reading, nothing on thermal, nothing on M. "It's not physical." "Doesn't matter," Jax said. "If it moves, we kill it." The seal throbbed again, harder this time. The amber light flickered, edges fraying into crimson. Jax felt the pressure rise, a weight pressing against his skull. Kale steadied himself against the wall. It's probing, testing the barrier, those distortions, they're fragments of it bleeding through. Jax chambered another round. Then we plugged the leaks. The corridor erupted with more distortions, half-formed shapes clawing at the air. Jax and Kale fired in controlled bursts, each shot precise, each movement economical. No wasted motion, no panic. Kale's rifle clicked empty. He swapped magazines with practiced speed. 2 minutes until fleet arrival. Jax dropped another target, the distortion unraveling under kinetic impact. 2 minutes is enough. The mothership's hull shuddered violently, a deep resonance that rattled their teeth. The seal flared, amber light blazing, then dimming to a sickly orange. Kale's voice was tight. "Containment's failing." Jax keyed his mic again. "Admiral, the entity is breaching. Request immediate strike authorization." Static, then Rourke's voice, colder than before. "Authorization granted. Fleet will initiate sterilization on arrival. Hold position until then." Kale's eyes met Jax's through the visor. "They'll burn us with it." Jax nodded once. "We knew the risk." The distortions thickened, filling the corridor with writhing shadows. Jax fired, Kale fired, their rifles a steady rhythm against the chaos. Each shot bought seconds, each kill a delay. The seal pulsed again, brighter, then fractured. A single crack split the amber glow, leaking crimson light into the corridor. The pressure surged, a tidal wave of hunger pressing against their minds. Kale staggered, clutching his helmet. "It's inside my head." Jax grabbed his shoulder, steadying him. "Focus, ignore it, rifle up." Kale forced his weapon into position, teeth clenched. "We hold." Jax's voice was iron. "We hold." The distortions lunged, dozens at once, a tide of half-formed horrors. Jax and Kale fired in unison, their rifles blazing, their movements precise. No hesitation, no retreat. The seal cracked wider, crimson light flooding the corridor. The entity's presence surged, a roar without sound, a hunger without form. Jax keyed his mic one last time. "Admiral, if you're listening, make it fast." The channel hissed, then silence. Kale's rifle clicked empty again. He drew his sidearm, firing into the tide. 1 minute. Jax's visor displayed fleet signatures on the horizon, distant but closing fast. He chambered his last round, the action smooth, final. The seal shattered. Crimson light engulfed the corridor, the entity spilling forth in a wave of impossible geometry, angles that bent reality, shapes that defied comprehension. Jax raised his rifle, calm, steady. "We hold." Kale's voice was a whisper, resolute. "We hold," and the corridor became fire. Chapter 12, Episode 4, ASF. The corridor was gone. What remained was a battlefield carved from fractured dimensions, crimson light bleeding into every surface. The entity's emergence warped the mothership into a labyrinth of impossible angles. Floors bent into ceilings, walls stretched into horizons. Human senses faltered, but the soldiers did not. Jack steadied his rifle, the last round chambered. Kale's sidearm barked, each shot swallowed by the roar of geometry unraveling. The distortions surged forward, their forms collapsing and reforming, claws becoming tendrils, faces dissolving into voids. "Fleet signatures closing," Jax muttered, voice clipped, precise. "We buy them 30 seconds. Kale's breathing was ragged but controlled. 30 seconds is a lifetime. The entity's hunger pressed harder, a psychic tide clawing at their thoughts. Kale felt his memories flicker, his childhood, his training, his first deployment, each one gnawed at by the crimson light. He forced them back, anchoring himself in the present. Jax's visor pinged. Admiral Rourke's fleet had entered weapons range. The mothership's hull trembled as human warships locked coordinates. "Admiral," Jax said into the calm as stone, "fire on my position." Static. Then Rourke's voice, iron and unyielding, "Confirm coordinates." "Confirmed," Jax replied, no hesitation. Kale's eyes widened. "You're calling a strike on us." Jax's tone was surgical. "We hold the breach. Fleet burns the infection." The entity surged, its form expanding into a cathedral of crimson geometry. Shapes twisted into towers, each one screaming without sound. The distortions lunged again, overwhelming numbers. Kale fired until his sidearm clicked empty, then drew his combat knife, slashing at tendrils that bent around the blade. "Kale," Jax said, voice steady even as the tide closed in. "Anchor yourself, we're not dying." "We're sealing it," Kale snarled, driving his knife into a distortion's shifting mass. "Then seal it fast." The mothership's hull shuddered. Outside, human cruisers unleashed their payloads. Kinetic slugs and plasma lances tore into alien alloy, ripping through layers of ancient architecture. Explosions cascaded across the mothership's surface, each detonation a thunderclap in the void. Inside, the entity screamed. The crimson cathedral fractured, shards of impossible geometry collapsing into dust. The hunger recoiled but not defeated. It surged toward Jax and Kale, desperate to consume before annihilation. Jax raised his rifle, the last round chambered. Aim not at the distortions, but at the core of crimson light, the heart of the entity. "Kale," he said, voice low, final. "On my mark." Kale tightened his grip on the knife, eyes locked on the core. "Mark," Jax fired. The round pierced the crimson heart, detonating in a burst of kinetic fury. The entity convulsed, its geometry collapsing inward. Kale lunged, driving his blade into the fissure, anchoring the collapse. The mothership screamed as the entity imploded, crimson light folding into itself. The distortions shrieked, dissolving into ash. The corridor reformed, walls snapping back into place, the impossible angles vanishing. Silence. Kale staggered, blood streaking his visor. "Is it gone?" Jax lowered his rifle, empty now. His voice was calm, resolute, contained, not destroyed. Outside, Admiral Rourke's fleet continued the bombardment, tearing the mothership apart piece by piece. Alien empires had once sealed the horror for eons, arrogant in their belief it would never awaken. Humans had faced it head-on, resourceful and unflinching, and forced it back into its prison. Kale leaned against the wall, exhausted. "We held." Jax's visor flickered, fleet signals stabilizing. He keyed his mic. "Admiral, breach contained, target neutralized for now. Recommend full incineration of the wreck." Rourke's reply was immediate. "Acknowledged, you bought us the window." Extraction inbound. The mothership's hull cracked under the fleet's relentless fire. Sections collapsed into the void, flames trailing across the alien architecture. The crimson glow dimmed, sealed once more beneath layers of collapsing alloy. Jax stood tall, calm even as the corridor burned around them. "We hold," he repeated, voice steady. Kale's whisper carried the weight of survival. "We hold." The derelict mothership disintegrated, swallowed by fire and steel. The ancient cosmic horror was forced back into silence, sealed again for now. But in the void, echoes lingered. The hunger had tasted humanity, and it would remember. End of Episode 4, ASF.